Today on Doomed! The undercover progressive spy that has infiltrated the far right-wing group Patriot Prayer. Who is he? What has he done? Why are the members of Patriot Prayer, along with their founder, sort of scared? There are legal ramifications, folks, and we will get into all that. And we'll find out even more about Patriot Prayer and the recent events in Portland surrounding that group, the Proud Boys, and even more with Alex Zielinski, news editor at Portland Mercury, on this episode of Doomed with me, Matt Binder. You could, as you know, folks, you could support this show by going to patreon.com/MattBinder. And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest, Alex. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let me just pull us up on the YouTube feed so people can see us. There we go. So, Alex, there's been so much going on in Portland surrounding the far right, and you've been covering so much of it with Portland Mercury. And it's stunning to me, and you were talking to me just a little bit before we went live, actually, about how, just by being a reporter for a local outlet, you just become so immersed nowadays, in Portland, I should say, you become so immersed nowadays with just what's going on with the far right.
Yeah, it's remarkable how much it's infiltrated just local politics. And, we have an election that's starting to gear up, and it's even kind of the talking points of candidates. It's something that it's more than just this fringy thing going on that has been kind of fringy for a while, but it's reaching this point where we have people across the country looking at Portland and being critical of Portland for the way that we're addressing protesters and protests and what the mayor's doing. And so it's a fascinating moment to be a city reporter in Portland.
Right. Well, let's actually set the stage here, because it's a question that's been on my mind, and I've discussed this with other people who cover the far right, but I've never spoken to someone who's just so integrated in, Portland politics and the scene there and what's going on. The far right, the white supremacist movements, neo-Nazis, since the ascension of Donald Trump to the presidency, they have just straight up grown all across the country. And there were so many events going on in 2016 and 2017 surrounding these groups. But I feel like pretty much everywhere, it really died down a lot after what happened in Charlottesville. Once someone died at the hands of one of these neo-Nazis, it was a lot harder for these people to A, have their public events, and B, when they do have their public events, pull them off without, them just being shut down immediately. But that seems to be the case everywhere, almost except for Portland. Yes, there's a lot of counter-protesters. Antifa shows up to attempt to shut down these events. But it seems like every time, I've seen events in New York with the Proud Boys where just a few of them show up and they disperse immediately. But it seems like people still get together in fairly large numbers with these groups in Portland, and they somewhat successfully manage to hold their rallies. What is it about Portland that these guys just keep going back and trying over and over again, and the numbers show up too?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to kind of understand the history and context of Portland as a city that's very welcoming and supportive of free speech, of right to protest. Just historically, it's been kind of an arena for a lot of big protests in the past. And so the city government here is really cautious to limit kind of any of those, any free speech activity. I don't know if you remember, in 2017, there was in Portland, there was a man who was a avowed white supremacist who ended up killing two men on our transit system here.
Right.
After they tried to defend or try to stop him from spewing kind of these racist slurs at a few women on the bus. And days after that, Patriot Prayer had planned this protest. It was kind of like had a vague, it was like Trump Freedom Rally or something. And the mayor actually, to his credit, at the time, the same mayor that we have now, he said, no, you can't come here. This city is mourning. This guy, the white supremacist Jeremy Christian, had marched with Patriot Prayer. They had ties, and so the mayor really tried to keep the protests from taking place. But then the ACLU came in and said, you like really can't do that. I mean, a lot of people give the ACLU, they think that they're really lefty and that they're just kind of protecting the progressive rights. But in this situation, they're like, even if it's this right-wing group, they're not threatening violence. Like, they have a right to speak. And so since that moment, the mayor has been really hesitant to push back at all. There has been little directed kind of opposition, I guess, from the city government to the far right folks. There's been a lot of equating the far right to anti-fascist groups here, which is frustrating for a lot of people to see. I think it's also important to know that Patriot Prayer is a very small group of people. Whenever you have these big protests in Portland, people come from far and wide, kind of fringy groups. You have a lot of overlaps of different kind of extremist alt-right groups like the Three Percenters and the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. And, it kind of draws in, it's kind of a magnet for a lot of these folks. And so when you see big protests, it's really a cobbled together group of different far right groups in the Pacific Northwest, which we happen to have a lot of.
Right. It's been fascinating to me actually to see, because usually when you think about these things, they usually happen in like DC or New York City. And it feels like on the East Coast, I mean, obviously we still have a neo-Nazi and white supremacist problem, but I feel like, especially with the Proud Boys on the East Coast, from what I've seen, when they're in the news, it's because counter-protesters found out about a private event they were holding and they met them outside of it. It feels like on the East Coast, these guys have pretty much realized that publicly they're going to have a problem organizing, so they do it all in private, and that's sort of how it goes here. But on the West Coast, it feels like they've just been
Wild
still
West, yeah.
Right. They've been still open to do it. They feel like they've had this ability to do it. But it's great to see counter-protesters come out and still meet them. But yeah. I'm glad you brought up the that stabbing on the bus, because that we've been seeing so much about these white supremacist shootings, and when people bring up how many white supremacist killings there have been in this country, I feel like that's one that's overlooked. But that one was all over the news when it happened, at least from what I saw, because it was so insane that these two people didn't know each other. I believe one was extremely young and one was an older gentleman.
Yeah, and there's three guys, and one of them survived, so he's not always listed, but it's also three white guys defending these two African American women. Yeah.
Right, and they just get stabbed by this guy.
Yeah.
I forgot all about that one. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, no, it's horrifying, and it's I wasn't living in Portland at the time. I was actually in DC, but I went to school here. I'm from here, and it was a really surreal thing to witness from afar, and wanting to be back here and actually see what's going on the ground. But I mean, that case is still working its way through the justice system. I think the actual trial for Jeremy Christian, it keeps being bumped to, I think it's next year now again. So justice is still pending on that one, but it's certainly formed a lot of decisions and shaped kind of added to maybe some anxiety around limiting protests and these protesters and not really knowing what they're capable of.
Right. So now that we've set the stage in Portland, let's move to this big story you had this week, because this story, like you mentioned before we started, it had, so we were talking about how it's sort of this one story set off like a domino effect that's created like so many just waves across, right wing news publications, well-known right-wing personalities. Patriot Prayer, one of the most it may be small, like you said, but they're definitely one of the most well-known of the far-right groups nowadays. It's an incredible story, and you broke it, and I want to just. I'm actually not sure where to start. I guess we should start with, how did you get in touch with this person who's infiltrated the Patriot Prayer group? Now they still don't know who this guy is yet, do they?
They know who this
They
guy
know
is.
he is now? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small enough group, and his videos have been made public. I mean, he's just a normal, he's a normal guy, and to the point where he's like, he has his phone and he's fumbling a few times and like hits the, reverse camera. And so just, you see his face and, and he's, it's really, people are very familiar with who he is. And I think a lot of folks already know what his name is. Right now we aren't sharing it just because he wants to stay as private as possible until, legally his name is going to be used in court. But I'll kind of walk back how I got connected to him in the first place. It came with his video that he took of Patriot Prayer and some members of the Proud Boys planning I have no other word to describe it, but kind of assault and on a targeted assault on a group of folks, members of Antifa, who were kind of celebrating at a local Portland bar after a day of May Day protests that were peaceful and it's just a space where they were hanging out. And so this video, during these events, there's always like 500 people live streaming, and it's like this very strange comical scene of just like everyone with their phones and trying to like be the person with the scoops. And so he just really blends in because he's live streaming kind of what's going on. A lot of the other people have their phones out or taking pictures, but it's this group of guys and actually a couple women, and they're kind of lingering a few blocks away from this bar, waiting for kind of the command from the founder, the leader of Patriot Prayer, a man named Joey Gibson, to kind of go in and start a violent confrontation on members of Antifa. And this confrontation itself has been, reported on since the day it happened. It's very well known that this happened. There was this weird street fight that the police didn't show up for like an hour after it happened, which was bizarre because it's in this very central area in Portland. There were these weird planned fights that were moderated. It was just a surreal experience. So everyone kind of knows that happened, but the putting blame on a certain group has been kind of tricky just because there hasn't been any footage of kind of how did this come to be? And so the video of these guys kind of lingering around, pretty much planning to go in and beat up members of Antifa. It's pretty damning evidence that was included in a recent filing in a court case or a lawsuit against Joey Gibson that has been filed by the owner of that bar. So it's already so confusing, but it's important to know that there's two different lawsuits that are being that are the focus of kind of what happened on May 1st, and one of them is coming from this bar which is called Cider Riot, and they a new motion includes this video, and so that's where I tracked down the video.
Cider Riot is a very Portland name for an establishment. I love it.
Especially for a place that now, I mean, a lot of the men who've been there or who were there that day are being charged with inciting a riot.
Right.
And so it's a little too close, but it's great.
When I first read the story, actually, before I was familiar with the place, I think the first story I read about it, I was had to go back and reread because I was like, wait a minute, is Cider Riot the name of what they're dubbing what happened, or is that the name? Right. Oh, that's the name of the place, right?
Now that we've made, Yeah, it's a cidery also. I always call it a bar, but they get like very upset. Um, and anyway, so this video, I posted it since I was looking through all the court documents. I'm like, this is because there have been a ton of videos that have come out since this clash, and this was by far, the most incriminating one that really showed the lead up to it. That's why it was in this new case filing. And so I shared it, and the videographer reached out to me. I think he caught a I had some like typo in my story. And because I wrote a story, I'm like, hey, this video is pretty crazy. Like this kind of, it's there's momentum growing that someone's gonna get arrested. And he sent me like a message on Twitter, just being like, you used the wrong word here. And he's like, oh, and yeah, there was some kind of reference. I was like, oh, thanks, for catching it, and then kind of hinted at who he was and set up a time to chat.
Ah.
But he certainly, I mean, to his credit, he certainly like, he didn't really want to come public and be public. I don't think he was prepared to be kind of a public figure. But in working with lawyers and working with the police to share this video, for any of the video evidence to stand in court, he has to, he has to use his name, he has to use his identity. So he's kind of bracing himself for that moment now.
Right. It's also probably a good idea to have himself out there like that, so people who would support him will be able to back
Right.
him up when his name does become public.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
certainly there's going to be, backlash from the right
Oh, yeah.
towards him. Right.
Hmm.
Did he like? How did this get out that this video existed? Like, did he hear about the lawsuits and reach out to the people who were suing Patriot
Hmm.
Prayer, or was he just uploading this stuff previously?
Yeah, he hadn't uploaded it. He had, it was on his Facebook. He had live streamed it at the time as just a Facebook live stream, but then made it private once the video ended. So anyone could have seen it at the time. And I mean, which is funny because on the video, he steps aside a few times and he says, "Hey, by the way, like whoever's listening, I'm not with these guys. I'm just like here to make sure I like keep an eye on them and let people know what's going on." And then he kind of returns back. So if anyone with Patriot Prayer was watching that video, they'd know what was going on, but that didn't seem to happen. Um,
Oh wow,
anyway, so
that's crazy. Right.
yeah,
They could
yeah,
have. How long was he? How long was he embedded in there to get this stuff?
2 years.
Oh my
But
god.
but honestly, this video was from May, and like it wasn't really a long game for him. It was just kind of like curiosity, I think.
Right.
He wasn't like, I am going to create this whole thing and like turn around and, use it in court. He, he's from Vancouver, Washington, which is where Patriot Prayer is based, just right across the border from Portland and in Washington. And, I think was just started by just being curious. He was like, what is going on in Portland? What are these like, what's the Vancouver representation doing down here? And then it just kind of became a thing. So yeah, so his videos, he ended up giving them to after the Mayday scenario. Cider Riot, Cider Riot's owner filed a lawsuit like 2 or 3 days later, which is the first time. It was kind of remarkable. It's the first time a business was, everyone was kind of waiting for something to like, how are we going to hold these people responsible that keep coming to our city and causing a ruckus? More than that, and so it's the first time that a private business sued, which was interesting. And as soon as that lawsuit came out, he said he sent that video to them, and then he was contacted by the police bureau here like a month or so later when they started doing their criminal investigation. So
Now,
um,
what exactly are they saying in the video that certainly is getting them into some legal trouble here?
yeah, that's a good question. So the basically the legal charges. I kind of work backwards, but the legal charges that at least um, six or seven men in that group are now being faced with. They all all are being charged with inciting a riot, and a few of them are charged with actual assault, which has already been caught in video in the actual fight itself. But the riot charges kind of stem back to this video. I mean, at least there could be other evidence as well that I don't know about yet. But this video, yeah, you have a group of guys who are kind of milling about, getting their like goggles on and getting their like the gloves with like the, I don't know, tactical gloves on and getting
Right.
ready for a fight. You have a guy with like a stick and he's like practicing swinging it. You have two other guys who are like trying to figure out which way the wind is blowing because they're like, I don't know, when I spray, I want to make sure the spray doesn't get in my eyes. and uh and I assume he's like, oh, like pepper spray, which ends up being sprayed in everyone's eyes at Cider Riot, and then talking about like we got weapons, we're ready, they're not gonna like see us coming. A lot of them, I mean, the big win I think for the legal team, but then also the police bureau here was getting a charge against Joey Gibson, who's kind of the leader of this all, and he wasn't really in those videos until he met up with that group a little bit like right before they got to
Right.
this bar. But there's a lot of discussion leading up to that point. People in touch with him being like, when's Joe, like Joey's going there? Like, when's he going to show up? What's he telling you? He's definitely orchestrating kind of what's going on. And up until now, he's said he had no idea that anyone else was going, that he just wanted to like go have a conversation. There was no like master plan. And it was pretty clear that there was some scheming, intentional planning going on. Um, so yeah, a lot of it's just like very simple. These are people who are planning to stir some shit up, and now it's on tape.
I got a smile on my face because I just can't get over the idea of them checking with which way the wind is blowing.
I know, it was very, it was like kind of thoughtful.
Where they lick their finger, put
Yeah.
it in the
Well, but they never. But the great thing is that I don't think they ever really like, came to a conclusion. Like they were trying to do this like Boy Scout thing, but none of them really like knew what they were doing.
Right. I don't think.
uh,
I know it's a Proud Boy thing, but I don't think there you get a Boy Scout badge for
right,
naming 3 cereals while getting punched a couple of times.
right,
That's the
yeah,
initiation thing. Yeah.
yeah.
But so did anyone like how did they know what was going on at Cider Riot to begin with though? Like how did they know to go there? Do we know that?
Don't entirely know. I'm sure. Yeah, it kind of it originated at least in the Patriot Prayer like conversation originated because like Joey Gibson found out, and I assume. I mean, there might be some people that he's like kind of friendly with who are friendly with Antifa. I mean, there might be another like spy with them, like who knows?
Right.
Um,
Spy
but
versus spy. Right.
but now that I think about it, I think there was like a Facebook event for I think Cider Riot's known to be kind of a place to host a lot of like lefty, like film screenings and like events and stuff. And I think they had some Facebook like May Day celebration that a lot of people who are who are Antifa folks, said they were going to. So I think it was like kind of like, yeah, okay, they're going to be there.
Right. It's a May Day event, so obviously
Yeah,
it's May Day. Yeah, I get
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. So did anyone? So there's 2 people suing them, right? You said the Cider Riot owner, and there's another lawsuit,
Well,
or
actually, there's another guy suing them, and this one isn't actually based specifically on Cider Riot. Um, Actually, no, yeah, no. There's one guy suing them. There's one guy suing the Proud Boys locally. That's a totally different
got
case.
it. We could
There's
talk
one
about
lawsuit.
that. We could talk about that later.
Yeah. There's one lawsuit. Um,
Did anyone get
for the
hurt?
Cider Riot owner, and then there's a criminal case. So you got a civil and a
Oh,
criminal case.
right.
Yeah.
Did anyone get hurt at this? Did was
Yeah.
there?
A woman, um, who was with the anti-fascist folks was hit with a police baton, not by a police officer, but by a man named Ian Kramer, and just knocked out, like
Jeez.
absurdly, just like takes one step and just like collapses on the sidewalk. And then another guy gets punched in the face, without really any provocation. another guy with Antifa. I mean, no one and everyone got pepper sprayed, but that's kind of a given.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, the damage was done to members of Antifa or people who were not with Patriot Prayer.
So we have 6 Patriot Prayer members, including its founder, Joey Gibson, currently in legal trouble because of this. And there is someone else that I would like to bring up who is also getting his world turned upside down, I guess you can say. And I think this is how most people, at least across the country, who pay attention to this stuff, I think that's how they, learned about this and sort of their understanding of the story. In the undercover spy video that he put up, there is a right-wing personality who is in the video, and he doesn't look good in the video. It's not looking good for this person. Can you tell us? Can you tell us who else is in this video and what's going on with that?
Yeah. So you're talking about Andy No,
Right.
who is a Portlander, lives in Portland, but also is pretty vocal online and is a up until recently was a contributor to Quillette, a kind of far right academia website. That espouses a lot of weird conspiracy theories.
Right. And just so everyone knows, though, academia, as in if you're considering PragerU a university, that's what you mean by Quillette being an
yeah, different kind of take. And he's also written a lot of kind of freelance pieces for specifically the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post about like what's happening in Portland. When it comes to these protests, he's always at the these clashes between far right Patriot Prayer folks and members of an Antifa and anti-fascist people, and he's always consistently taking videos of kind of what Antifa is doing. A lot of times, you'll see pictures of him kind of standing with the far right, videotaping everyone in front of him. He doesn't really turn that video very often on members of Patriot Prayer. But he has made a living kind of villainizing progressives in Portland, and really, I mean, successfully helped drive this narrative that like Portland is this crazy like communist wasteland that's where anarchy is like king and everyone's punching each other in the streets. It's like hilarious because I think if you don't live in Portland, that is very far off. I mean, it's a crazy perception, especially when these fights are going on. Like no one, like maybe 25% of the city knows that there's like a protest. The rest of us are just like happily enjoying our lives, or just don't really know what's going on. The streets are not running with like the blood of Republicans or something. So
right. There's not anti-fascists roaming the streets like Walking Dead zombies, right?
Exactly. Like if that was true, that would be like a story, right? Like more than one person would be reporting on that, and it's noteworthy that that's only really coming from one guy, and so he's often this kind of talking head that's invited on Fox shows and different right-wing kind of media shows to be the guy who says like, yes, like Portland is definitely like this hellhole of liberalism, and the mayor and politicians here are just like bowing to Antifa, and it's really helped perpetuate this stereotype. So a lot of people here, especially in city government, are really like he brings them a lot of grief. Because his reporting and his coverage, leads to a lot of hate on the city, especially to the point where we had Ted Cruz, I forgot his name, which was lovely for a second, Senator Ted Cruz. He's in Congress trying to label Antifa this like hate group, purely because of the kind of coverage that Andy has been perpetuating. To be fair, a reason he has been kind of in the spotlight this summer, specifically nationally, was because he was like doing his normal thing at a June 28th 8th protest in Portland, filming, was in the middle of a crowd of Antifa folks, and a couple of them assaulted him. They punched him, and he went to the hospital. He was punched in the face. Someone dumped a milkshake on him at the end. And granted, like, no one is applauding.
We should also just say that according to Andy No and his right wing friends, it wasn't just a milkshake; it was a concrete milkshake.
Right. I mean, according to Andy No, but also according to the Portland Police Bureau, who still hasn't taken down a tweet,
right?
Which is like so infuriating to me, because it's one thing for folks on the right to say it and make it up, but there's no evidence,
Right. Right.
Anyway.
I know you probably can't say this, but I can. There's that Rage Against the Machine song, and I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, so he was assaulted. There's like no good thing about that. No one should be assaulted in the streets. It was scary. But the video of him being punched, kind of that whole narrative, was really used into like Antifa is like beating up journalists in the streets. And it's tricky, but it's really important to understand what kind of damage Andy has had on the just Portlanders. There was a period of time where he was trying to undermine there were a lot of alleged, not reported, but like just suspected hate crimes being taking place in Portland against LGBT people, and a number of different folks were kind of sharing out on Facebook, being like, "Hey, my like neighbor, this one thing happened," and there was a lot of fear within the LGBT community, and there were no police reports filed. Of course, the queer community here doesn't really trust the police a lot of times with taking these things seriously. So it's unclear what happened, what didn't happen, but there was a real tangible fear in the LGBT community. He fed off of that fear and tried to undermine and try to like disprove all of these alleged kind of assaults as hoaxes, and really got like a lot of points from the right about that. But it really, I mean, nationally, sure, he won, his arguments, but locally, it really hurt a lot of members of the queer community. Direct attack, and then from that onward, and his coverage of Patriot Prayer, it's added. I'd say it's added to the level of fear and kind of anxiety in Portland. It's empowered Patriot Prayer. It's empowered people that a lot of folks here consider fascist, which is scary. He is considered kind of a PR guy for those groups, and so I think to call him a journalist and to say journalists are being attacked by Antifa is untrue with that context. Not saying at all that like he deserved any of it, but that was really missing from the like, hey, let's talk about like the reason why like he was targeted. No other journalists in Portland have ever been hurt by Antifa. They know also not to get in the middle of it when, shit starts hitting the fan. That's not the place we need to be. So there's context that was really missing. He ended up kind of being the focal point of a lot of, Ted Cruz, Antifa's fascist, or Antifa's, Antifa, designated hate group.
Right. I'm anti-Antifa without realizing what that's it's saying
right,
about you.
Exactly. And then Donald Trump ended up kind of pushing the same narrative, thanks to Fox News, I'm sure. And
well, Andy, after he got his taste of a cement milkshake, he went on Tucker Carlson's show. He got a nice little national bump there. Yeah.
Definitely. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast, which is very popular.
Yes.
And so people like know who he is. And so it's been, it was interesting. It was especially interesting to see him on these videos, kind of he was marching with the group like he was part of the group. He was with them as they were planning their attack. He was not filming any of this. He began live streaming when he got to Cider Riot. He did no reporting that said, "Hey, I was there to witness this like planning. I saw that these guys were getting armed up and planning, and that they were planning on hurting people and being violent and you know." He just kind of like silently stood by. He laughed at some of their jokes, which didn't look good. He just kind of, it looked like he was like a bud, like they were all kind of pals.
Right.
And when
Right.
I spoke to the this undercover guy, um, he was there and he said some, he's been at a lot of these events where Andy Ngo is there and says it's kind of understood that Patriot Prayer looks out for Andy and Andy looks out for them in his writing, and that he doesn't speak up when something that's clearly criminal is taking place, which is not what a journalist's role is.
Right. I saw you.
There's a moment where you can leave the space. You can either film it and say, hey, this is a criminal thing, gonna go tell the police, or write about it, or you leave and call the cops. I don't know. There's different ways to handle that situation, I think.
Right. Right. Absolutely. No. Absolutely. I mean, you tweeted a couple of days ago from a story that quoting, I guess, a member of the Proud Boys.
Yeah.
Andy Ngo was fucking told that if he wanted protection from the Proud Boys, he went in with us and he went out with us. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's right that's from their own mouth. They had an agreement of some sort.
He was told. Yeah. I mean, he didn't. In that context, he didn't follow the agreement, which was the problem. But
Right.
but to even know that, I mean, sure, he wasn't working with them, in that scenario, I guess. But the fact that was an already, agreed upon thing. I've definitely never had anyone from the Proud Boys reach out to me to tell me that they'd protect me going in.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, you have to, as we know about Portland with Antifa, just willy-nilly attacking journalists on the street, that you have to be careful of both the anti-fascists and the white supremacists.
Right. Yeah.
You mentioned before how Andy Ngo is giving a lot of problems to the city of Portland, and I think that's a great thing to say that really sets him apart as a journalist, as not being a journalist, because in the context, if you were talking about a journalist giving problems to a city, it would be a good thing because it would be some sort of story about unveiling some sort of corruption or something like that.
Right.
If the highest powers at the city are unhappy with your reporting, like 99.9% of the time, that's something to be proud. Yeah, right. But this is just him not being truthful and just in bad faith bringing problems to the city.
Which is frustrating as a reporter who covers the city, because there's a ton of stuff that we could be getting a national, press on about problems with the way the city of Portland's being run, that I'm happy to get into details on. But one of them, and the biggest one of them, is not that we're being overrun by Antifa. And so it's frustrating that there's this perception that that's like our biggest issue. Like there's so many other things going on, good things, bad things. Like we are a city that has no time to focus uniquely on anti-fascists.
Right. So let's actually get to that Portland rally that the Proud Boys put together. Not last weekend, but the weekend before last, August 17th, I believe.
17th.
And the article that I was quoting about from that Proud Boy who said, this was the arrangement with Andy Ngo.
Right.
It stems from, and I think this is the biggest moment. We could start here, because you were on the ground there at the rally, correct? So great. So you could really tell us your experience with what you personally saw. And let's start actually with the event that had everyone talking, the Hammer event on the bus. And it was insane to watch this go down. And I mean, I've been covering the right for, probably a decade now, at least. And it never surprises me that, how things are are contorted to benefit the people who are perpetual victims when they are not apparently the ones who they call snowflakes. But it was so fascinating, I guess is the word, to watch a clear as day picture of a guy with the Proud Boys on a bus swinging a hammer outside the bus, and then literally that was from the people I was seeing on Twitter and everything. But then in the right wing sphere, the picture that was being spread was that same guy who was swinging the hammer sitting outside on a corner holding his arm in pain, with them going with, and the caption was like, "Anti-fascists attack this poor elderly man," and it's like,
Right.
oh, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. I mean, that's just like classic what comes from these protests. You just have everyone like playing to, I mean, it's both sides really. Like, I don't want to be the both sides person, but when it comes to like, milking the drama
Right.
and picking and choosing, sometimes it happens from everyone. But yeah, this one was kind of notoriously goofy because if you see the video, there's a guy coming from a bus that's filled with Proud Boys holding a hammer and swinging it at people. It ends up being taken from folks on the ground who are like, please stop hitting us with this hammer. And he ends up getting hit as well, but it's instigated. Again, some of these things are instigated by folks on the right, kind of escalating it by adding a weapon or adding violence to a scenario. That was that was remarkably the biggest flashpoint of that protest. There was so much hype around this Proud Boys protest. It was one of these things that was planned in the wake of Andy Ngo getting punched. That was kind of the reason that these Florida Proud Boys decided to fly out to Portland and have a big rally.
Right. Alex, in your experience, how often do the Proud Boys or any other far-right group put together an event in Portland specifically for a journalist?
It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened before now.
Interesting.
Interesting. Like, honestly, this is one of the first protests that was even put together by the Proud Boys. It's usually Patriot Prayer, and then you have some like local Proud Boy representatives there.
Right.
It was definitely remarkable. It was a unique scenario, which drew a lot of attention. Obviously, I mean, the number of anti-fascist groups that came out to oppose this protest was like, triple the size of the members who, the alt-right folks who came.
I will say though, it was surprising to me, even with the counter protesters outnumbering them. It was surprising to me, and I wasn't there. I just saw from pictures, so maybe you could give a better on the ground account. But I was surprised by how many people showed up to this thing.
There are about 300 probably.
Right.
Yeah.
In 2019, there's just not that many. Like, again, I really go out of my way on this show to mention, when I say these public events from these groups are dwindling, it doesn't mean the threat of these guys are dwindling. I mean, we see what's happening with the people who are sort of brainwashed or radicalized by them, what they go out and do. There's, the threat is, if anything, in my opinion, growing. But solely these public protests, these public events where they sort of, pound their chest to show their numbers or whatever, those events have been dwindling. But this to me was shocking to see even 300 people make it out.
Yeah, it was certainly remarkable. I think another thing that added some, fear to the possible outcome of this was that there was a guy arrested or temporarily detained in El Paso right after that shooting, who was outside an immigrant community center, like with a gun, like threatening folks, had this huge truck with like the Trump bumper stickers around it. You might have seen it. And he was like, hey, after they let him go, because he wasn't really doing anything that was a crime, he told everyone, hey, I'm going up to Portland. There's this thing happening in Portland. And that's when my mom called me, and that's just like, it shows what kind of people are attracted to these groups. I mean, he was yeah, he was definitely someone who was following the footsteps of this El Paso shooter. Um, and so that was kind of the anxiety factor, at least locally. And that's why there was such a large opposition. I mean, sure, there are your classic people that show up in Black Bloc, the main kind of anti-fascist group here. But then you had so many different coalitions come out, members of the NAACP. You had like this Buddhist, this like meditation in the very beginning. There was like people in wacky costumes. There were kids. I mean, it was just very like we're gonna. I don't know. It was a strong showing of people in the community who are not like letting this, you know, end poorly.
Right. There's this great picture I saw of it's like a bunch of Antifa people in like the bandanas covering their face or the mask covering their face, and standing in front of them are two women in a wheelchair and this black guy who is all over the protest. It was
Right.
and I mean it was just such a cool picture actually of like just to show you like literally people from all over came to protest these guys.
Yeah, you had a mayoral candidate there, uh, hanging out, and just like people, I think, really wanted to make a showing to show that, like, hey, these don't have to be scary events. This can be us coming together as a community and just letting people know that they're not welcome here.
Now, how is the police presence or reaction to what was going
Yeah,
on?
so that's always it's interesting. I think by now that's always what I focus on the most at these protests because I kind of know where everyone stands. I'm not going to come up and be like, "Hello, Proud Boy, what's your take? Why are you here?" I and you're not
Can
going to get a
you
good answer.
can you actually please just for I don't care what they say. I just want video of
Hello.
you going up to a Proud Boy going, "What up, Proud Boy? How you doing today?"
Yeah, like what's the scoop? What are we out here for? What's going on? That's just like a waste of my time.
And you got to wear the
And
hat with the little press card in it and
right, yeah, like hey, um, yeah. So I focus mostly on the police, and honestly, a lot of the times the way the police react is more of the focus of local media and local press here. It's not, really who these people are. It's like, okay, how are the members of law enforcement who we pay to, that are our employees, how are they acting, and is it constitutional? And so, you know, keeping in mind that I've seen kind of what the police look like in the different protests in the past. Um, what we saw on the 17th was like astronomical. Every single officer was working. Um, everyone was armored, which is kind of normal, but there were just almost like an officer for every protester. It seemed there were so many of them, and a lot of them seemed almost like kind of roving around looking for like where they needed to be because like there was so many of them, which I think, I mean, to their credit, I think the huge number of police like physically blocking um, anti-fascist groups and Proud Boys and creating like a lot of distance between them did a lot to like keep that keep that event, calmer than it could have been. Um, they also ended up one of the kind of controversial, at least locally controversial parts was there was this bridge that was closed for the protest. Portland has a ton of bridges, but there was this one specific one that was closed, and it was just going to be like kind of I think where police were monitoring, and it was really close to where the protest was happening, so they just didn't want anyone on it. Um, but after like 30 minutes of kind of hanging out there, the Proud Boys, I guess, checked in with the police and said, "Hey, we're ready to go home. Like, can you open up this bridge so we can get to our cars?" And and the police and they did that. They opened up the bridge, which honestly, I mean, in retrospect, so the optics, I hate this word, but the optics of that was really awful. You have these pictures of like the Proud Boys just taking the bridge. It's like there's no opposition in front of them. There's no one being like, you know, countering them. They're just like gleefully marching over one of these like kind of a very like notorious Portland bridge everyone kind of recognizes, and the police allowing them to do that. So that on its own looked very bad, but I think for the safety of Portlanders, allowing them to like leave the city as quickly as possible, and also there are police on the other side making sure they're like getting in their cars and leaving. which most of them did, which for, it's honestly a great thing.
Right.
They, it was like this 40-minute, 45-minute rally, and everyone got in their cars and went back to Vancouver. And I think it was kind of shocking to some people that that was kind of the intention. I think the Proud Boys were very intentional about not being violent, and like they were very, they were trying to look, it was very like PR kind of day for them.
Right.
Uh, and successful in that way. But I think also Portland law enforcement was successful at keeping them from having to, you know, bleed into the city um, and cause some kind of other melee. So it's tricky. It's complicated to, you know exactly what the right call in that scenario was. But the police were um, were doing, we're thinking smartly about
Right.
it.
I guess what most people have a problem with, and from my experience at
Mm-hmm.
left wing protests, is that when you look at the right wing protests and how the police act, and the left wing
Mm-hmm.
protests how the police act, it's like, all right, we get that like the police are supposedly there to make sure that the event goes on without anyone getting hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like when it's a right wing planned event, they are making sure the counter protesters aren't doing anything to the people who are on the right. It's like they're
Right.
protecting the right wingers. But when it's a left wing event, it seems like they're there to not make sure that the left wingers are the ones who. It's like oh, you
Yeah.
know, the right wing, we're to make sure that they have their event and they're the ones protected, and the counter protesters are kept away. With this, it's like they just want to disperse the left wing protesters, make them not even
Mm-hmm.
have their event. I mean, you see with Occupy, Black Lives
Yeah.
Matter events, anti-war protests. I think
Yeah.
that's sort of what
Yeah.
the
You're
issue
right.
always ends up being.
Right. Yeah. No. You're entirely correct. And in Portland, that's been a big issue. Just the perception of how the alt right is treated compared to members of Antifa. There's like high fiving and handshaking and buddy buddy kind of camaraderie between officers and members of the alt right. And then, I mean, in February, we uncovered documents finding that there was text messages between one of the uh, like police liaisons for just anyone who plans a protest, and Joey Gibson. That was, the police officer was sending him messages, letting him know where Antifa was during a protest, like, "Hey, watch out! They're like around this corner," or like, "Good job today." Stuff that is like friendly police officer talk to anyone who's not a member of the alt right trying to assault people in your city. And so there is a very real feeling of the police have a lot of work ahead of them to prove to the city that they aren't just there to look out for these like members of the alt right who like are kind of hammy with them and close with them, regardless of people, members of Antifa really distrust them and don't want to build relationships. And I think the police take that as like a personal kind of affront when there's real reasons why they're not, shaking hands and saying thanks. I mean, they've been pepper sprayed enough times by the police. So yeah, there's a big that the marching over the bridge really didn't help fix that
Right.
perception.
Listener Lily on Periscope wants me to bring up that apparently, according to them, the Proud Boys actually had planned to walk the bridge to hang their flag. I don't know if that's the case or anything. I'm not sure.
I wasn't aware of that. They all were like waving their flags and doing their thing. I didn't see anyone trying to put up a flag there.
Right.
But I wouldn't hold past it. I know that they were all like singing their "Proud of Your Boy" song, that like Aladdin
Right.
musical. Yeah, they were all like boldly, singing as they march over the, which is just like a scare, like a just a thing that's kind of like burned in your mind now. Of like when I bike to work, I bike over that bridge. I'm like, this was a weird place recently. So
It's it's amazing that the tough guys of the right, at least that's what their little boys club is supposed to be. Is they got an Aladdin song as their theme song, and they, like I mentioned earlier, their initiation is naming 3 breakfast cereals while getting punched by other members of the group.
Yeah.
But Alex, this has been absolutely great. You do great reporting, and it's been, your work at the Portland Mercury has been really important to. I mean, I wanted to stress that people, I think nowadays don't really get just how important local journalism is, and I mean, this is proof that not only is local journalism important for the city, but especially in this day and age, a lot of these things become national issues, and local reporters are so ingrained in what's going on there that there's no one better to cover these national issues that are happening in these cities than people such as yourself. So great work. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And where can people follow you online?
They can follow me personally on Twitter at Alex_ZEE. But you also can go to the portlandmercury.com, check out other reporting by our news team, and read other crazy right-wing bullshit going on there.
Have a good night, Alex. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll come on again soon.
Great, thanks.
Bye. All right, everybody. Let me just pull up the... Okay. Let's thank the Patreon members. Patreon.com/Matt Binder. That's how you can support this show. Last week, I went on the Majority Report with Sam Cider, but Sam Cider wasn't there. But anyway, Michael Brooks, my good friend, producer and co-host of the Majority Report, was on the show hosting for Sam. And it was great to be seated. I'm putting together 2 words here. Seated next to him, like old times, Matt and Mike Mondays that we did back when I worked at the Majority Report. And it was great. And thanks to that appearance on the show, we have hundreds of new YouTube subscribers. We have about a dozen new Patreon members. We're really inching closer than ever, actually, to our goal. This show is going to grow. I can feel it, thanks to all you new supporters joining forces with all my previous supporters. And I'm pumped. I am psyched for what we're going to do on this show. So patreon.com/MattBinder. We're on the road to that goal. Go there, become a patron subscriber. I really appreciate it. And without any further ado, these are the people who are making this show possible thanks to their monetary monthly donations. Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Andrew H, Ari R, Benji, Bobby M, Champagne Kami, Chi, Christine H, Colin R, Dakota R, Dan M, Dank Uger, Dave K, David Z, Dragon Slayer, Floaties, Frauds K, FTW All Day, Greg D, Hockey, because they cut this off, I want to read the whole name. Hockey Game Enjoyer, thank you. Ian Curtis J, Jameson Test, Janelle A, Jason R, Jasmine H, Jeff K, Jeremy M, John S, Jonathan B, Joseph R, Katie S, Katz, Kaushal, Kyle, Lisa D, Lisa H, the Lisas, as was mentioned, I saw on Twitter. There's 2 Lisas now. Thank you, Lisas. Machine Gun Etiquette, Max W, User Me, Melissa M, Michael B, Michael J, Michael M, Mr. Danks, Nicole A, Namde Net, Null Style, Romina O, Ryan Left His Best, Samuel F, Scott R, Stephen S, Struggle Session, Swizzle M, TM, Tamney G, Thaddeus A, Tina M, Tom G, Tom M, Why That Tie Guy, Will P, Wutopian, and Zarin. As I've mentioned, I will not always be able to name every single person on every episode. So get in while you can and get a guarantee you'll be mentioned. And also, to the original people, I guess the first, all the people who were the first to, until I hit that goal, I'll make sure you're always mentioned somewhere. I'll make sure I mention you guys on the show, on the site. You guys will always have a props for being the OGs of Doomed with Matt Binder. You can also support this show by going to doomedpod.com, which has links to the iTunes, the Google Play. Go there, leave a review, leave a star review, a written review. It helps us rise in the rankings. We almost have 150 written, or overall, I forget which, iTunes reviews. So 2 more people. Let's get us to that 150 point. Also, youtube.com/Matt Binder. The YouTube channel has been growing, like I said, since going on the Majority Report. Let's keep it growing. The YouTube channel is super important to this show. Dare I say, one of the most important things about this show that'll help it grow. Follow me on Twitter at Matt Binder. Follow me on YouTube. Go to YouTube and search Matt Binder. Not YouTube, what am I saying? Facebook and search Matt Binder. YouTube, you go to youtube.com/Matt Binder, like I said. Instagram at Matt Binder. Yeah, that's where you could go. Help support the show. And the most important thing you could do, whether you could support the show monetarily or not. And once again, if you don't have the funds, the financial ability to do so, please take care of yourself and your family first. And do this. Tell people about the show. Tell your friends about the show. Really. Tell your friends about the show. Share the YouTube links. Share the podcast. Tweet it out. Facebook share it. Whatever. That's what you could do. It helps a lot. Really. Word of mouth is extremely helpful. And before we end the show, a lot of people who watch this show, whether you are a fan of this show or you watch me from the Majority Report, know my dad. He is often in the YouTube chats. He often is a IMer into the Majority Report. You know him as Binder Dad. You might see him on Twitter sometimes at Alan J. Binder. This week, for the first time in his 65 years, I don't know if he cares that I'm throwing out his age. I don't think he would. He had to go to the hospital. He, according to doctors, had a mild heart attack. He's fine now. He had a procedure. He is back home. He is still doing his corny dad jokes. He might be listening to the show right now. I just know that everyone who watches this show and watches the Majority Report knows who he is. So, send him a tweet at Alan J. Binder, like I said. Tell him, hope he's feeling good. That's all. Yeah. He's a member of the Left is Best, sort of live streaming YouTube podcast world. So, glad you're home, Dad. All right, everybody. We're going to the patron-only portion of the show where I will read your IMs. And we will see all you freebie listeners next week on Doomed. All right, everybody, welcome to the patron-only portion of the show. Let's if if you're watching the live stream, feel free to stick around and let's have some fun. Let me pull up the comments. My dad just sent a Facebook message, a YouTube chat. Home from the hospital, he is watching the show in good spirits. He said he is watching. I am, says my dad. Good to have you in the audience, Pops. Let's see. Let's go to the chat. Bullwhip Johnson says, I got it. A new name. The Binder Bundle. Am I right, Doomers? No idea what you're talking about there, Bullwhip Johnson. Grimlock. Charleston shooting was the day after Trump announced his run. The violence started from the very beginning, as I see it. Not to take away from that point, but clearly this person had been planning this for a while. But yes, there's definitely, your point is well taken. But I also want to, like I have in previous episodes, especially most recently, the episode where I spoke to Michael Hayden about the white supremacist in the U.S. State Department. This has been going on for long before Trump. Trump emboldened them, and certainly got worse under Trump. But this is not new. Renee says, organize and resist. Renee also says, Marxist Binderism. I like that. Kennedy says, giving the far right speech rights is bad, actually. I agree with you, but also I get it. I'm torn by this because I do think that you can have a slippery slope in terms of, and I'm not one of those people who's like, I'm going to stand up and defend them. No, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But it does worry me because, it gets closer to the idea that someone on the left will get banned or someone on the left will have their event deplatformed or shut down by the state. It's a tough area. You guys have to understand that, to the center, the right of center, left of center, the moderates, the far right comes along with a far left. And the both sides thing where they're both bad and dangerous. You guys hate hearing that online. Imagine if those people had the power to shut down both far right and far left of marches, protests, events, YouTube channels, Facebook pages, the works. Again, I'm not going to stand up and defend these guys. Fuck them. But, it is something to have in the back of your head when you see this stuff happening. I'm not one of those, first they came for the neo-Nazis and I didn't speak out. That's ridiculous. But do keep in mind that there will be problems. Look now, seriously. I can't tell you how long we on the progressives and on the left, if there was a civil rights issue, there was hope that the federal government would fix whenever the state and local governments failed. During the Obama years, for example. We were often disappointed, but anyway, now it's the opposite. Because of the Trump administration, we look towards the state to defend against the federal government's terrible rulings and laws. It all depends on who's in charge, man. That's what I'm saying. That's why you gotta be a little bit cautious. Damn, I just remembered I forgot to plug the super chats. Well, patron subscribers, if you want to give a super chat out today, feel free. Or if you're a live stream listener still listening. I guess that's how you would give a super chat anyway, right? Let's go back to the comments. Renee says, guess Dark Gritty didn't like the D-Day background. Oh no, Renee, I forgot to get the backgrounds you sent again. I actually have a really fun background that I got myself. And I will have to show it to you guys. I guess next episode I'll get it ready. And I promise, Renee, I'll get your backgrounds ready for that too. And during this portion of the show, we'll go through them. It'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun. Kyle on Periscope says Bernie 2020. Also says Hamburglar on the right, which I'm not quite sure what that means. Are you saying I'm the Hamburglar? Renee says, gotta confront Tiny and call him out as a fascist mascot and single him out to fight. Prey upon his bride while calling him like a duck. Grim says, also, Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys already let spill that their goal is to waste Portland resources and make Wheeler look bad. Right. Alex mentioned that later on after Grim also... after Grim mentioned that in the comments here. They should never be given a permit again. Right. Grim says Trump wants a race war. 1 Watts on Periscope says keep protesting, don't let them scare you. Not sure who that's directed to. I'm gonna guess Antifa if you're watching this show, unless you're a Periscope troll, which is also a possibility. I guess we'll just never know unless 1 Watts also commented later on. Grim about Ben, the undercover spy in Patriot Prayer. That guy definitely needs to be in witness protection. I think Antifa will have his back. Renee says, I'll try to make a JPEG with doomed in wrestling letters and a tiny dark gritty. Chuck E. Cheese! Charles Entertainment Cheese is in the house. I've been sharing the same Andy No video since March. Why did it take so long to get noticed? Chucky, you've been sharing the one from the undercover spy since March? If so, you should have sent that directly to me and let me know about it. I did not come across it. If you're still in the chat, please let me know if that's the one you're talking about. Banjo Bill says, LOL, chuds are so ridiculous. Wilco calls them the Boy Scout lads. Pinfold! Bill was about that life, but the Proud Boys will never go out on their shied their pussy. No, what? Huh? What? Banjo Bill says, Mayday, I'd have left this place. Right. Talking about why they were at Cider Riot. Chucky, they ended up having a 1v1 and the Antifa guy won, then Patriot Prayer declared him the winner and mover in the Cider Riot video are really strange. Farmer CP Michael on Periscope. Andy, no! Banjo says, Andy can't hold fruit anymore. Right. Grim says, Quillette is para-academic. Pseudo-intellectual, says Pinfold. Now this is fun. Someone with the name Matt Binder on Facebook left me a comment here on the live stream. It's a shame to see another Matt Binder trying to make it as a journalist by just peddling the same predictable talking points as the rest of the Twitter hive mind. I hope you Orange Man bad yourself to a blue check mark. Well, Matt Binder on Facebook, who sadly shares my name, I already have a blue check mark, buddy. I proudly have a verified blue check mark on Twitter. So I already Orange Man batted myself to that blue check mark. And actually, to get it straight, I got that orange blue check mark well before Trump became president. Thank you very much. So you, Matt Binder, who unfortunately shares my name, can go screw yourself. But really, it makes me... it's a shame to see another Matt Binder being a non-playable character and saying the blue checkmark thing. I'm going to assume you also make jokes about there being just two genders and also trans people using women's bathrooms. Because, of course, you're a very original thinker. It's always great to see right-wingers think they're so original when they actually are the ones who regurgitate the same right-wing talking points over and over again. It's fascinating to see that they can't think that for a second that someone can think for themselves and believe that Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer and white supremacist neo-Nazis are bad. That must be something they were brainwashed to believe. It's a shame you have my name. With a last name like Binder, too. You know the origins of that name, right, buddy? Weird. Really weird. Sorry, by the way. I'm sure it really hurts your feelings to see that if you Google Matt Binder, it's pretty much all this leftist coming up first. All my Twitter accounts, my writing, my Doomed with Matt Binder podcast and YouTube channel must really hurt your feelings. Ooh, I'm going to double down even more now and make sure that my SEO is completely on point and that I'm covering not just the first page, but the second, third, fourth. I want anyone who Googles Matt Binder and might just happen to be looking up you, say you're applying for a job at the Daily Caller or something, and they get confused and see that, hey, Matt Binder's a leftist, thinking it's you, and you don't get that job. That's what I hope. Ooh, I'm pumped now. I've had other Matt Binders reach out to me because we share the same name on online. Usually joking about how I couldn't get my name on Twitter because you already have it. And surprisingly, not surprisingly, excuse me, happily I could say, they were all pretty cool. Most of them seemed to be at the very least center-left, Democrats at least. But man, a right-wing Matt Binder? What is this, fucking bizarro world? Have we fallen into another dimension? Have we reversed Thanos' snap? I still haven't seen Endgame. Shit. Pinfold. Oregon used to be a white-only state. Its constitution. Right. I didn't bring that up in the first half of the show because, I sort of just wanted to focus on what we were talking about. But yes, I guess I could have brought it up. Just didn't think about it at the moment. But yes, it's an interesting history. And actually, now that you mention it, I would like to do an episode just on that. Dedicated episode to Oregon's history because it's fascinating that that's the case. Renee says they missed getting featured on Portlandia, talking about Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer, right? Brian Arguello. Portland is like the nicest and most Mayo city on the West Coast. Renee says back in the day, Oregonians gave hell to Chilean 49ers. Pinfold says less than 5% black population. Right. Certainly I'm going to do an episode on it. Absolutely. We should do an episode focusing on it. Banjo Bill talking about Andy No was pushing his camera in people's faces. Right. We previously discussed why Andy got milkshakes thrown at him at that previous Portland event. Right. He was not, she mentioned he was doing his thing. And everyone who watches this show and listens to this show knows his thing is not being a journalist, trying to agitate and cause problems with counter-protesters and Antifa. Grimm says the GOP is marching towards being full neo-Nazi. Of course they want to ban the opposition. Renee says, you saw the AOC Penguin video? The AOC Penguin video is wonderful. I love it. For those who don't know, it's a video of good old Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez running back and forth at a zoo or an aquarium, I'm not sure, and a penguin behind the glass following her back and forth. Very cute. Very cute. Renee, the neo-Nazis hide behind being pseudo-revolutionary and keep on the margins from the standard GOP. Politics Understander says ACF. All cops are fash. Ryan says, poor Andy No can't even hold the fruit cup in his hand anymore because he's got that brown brain. Pinfold says, white genetic annihilation and Western culture are the only platform the right wing have as platforms. My Love on Periscope says, what dimension is the guy on the left in? Oh, my black background? Thank you. I'm going to have a background. I promise you. I promise you. Oh, got a patron live on the show. Thank you for joining, Christopher B. Thanks for the support. You will be mentioned on the main show next week. Politics Understander, turnabout is fair play, therefore white genocide is good, actually. Grim says, breed out the Caucasian menace. Chucky says, if you listen to Andy No on Myth Informed podcast about 2 years ago, he said he developed the accent because he couldn't pronounce English well. The Andy No fake British accent is the most hilarious thing in the world. Because just watch videos of just a few years ago and there is no accent. It is so funny. And if that's his reason for doing it, that is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Bullwhip says, I keep getting notifications about Cuomo calling out a Trump official on his show. He's trying to prove he's not afraid of. That was another bizarre thing. Just really weird. Really weird. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, apparently, well, not apparently, there's video. Chris Cuomo was called Alfredo. There's some video out there, not on a show, like at an event or something. I think it was at a Trump event that he was covering. And he got all upset and claimed it's like the N-word for Italians. Now, as someone who is partially Italian, I can tell you that Fredo is not the N-word for Italians. There is no such thing as the N-word for Italians. There is no N-word but the N-word. And that is not for Italians. Just, Italian people have this real victimization complex. Really, come on. Come on, guys. Come on. Come on. Forget about it. Come on. Unbelievable. Sarah says, I can't believe I missed so much. Hey, everyone. You came in late, but guess what? You can watch the replay on YouTube. You can download the podcast and listen on the go. You missed it live, but you could catch up easily after the show is over. Men in Pajamas on Periscope. He wouldn't have that fame talking about Andy No if he wasn't attacked. True? Well, he was a growing right-wing personality, but without a doubt, yes. He became a mainstream right-wing figure and got those Fox News invites when he was attacked. So, yeah. Pinfold says, Joe, that's a good fucking point, Rogan. I would really like to do I've been talking to you guys about doing those standalone videos. You know, YouTube videos that aren't part of this long-form interview podcast show that I do, Doomed. You know, separate from that, I want to do YouTube videos, you know, because they're much easier to share for people who aren't familiar with me and Doomed. And one of them I want to do is on Joe Rogan. I really got to get on top of that. For the record, I don't think Joe Rogan is a fascist. I'm not even sure he's a right-winger. He certainly agrees with some right-wing ideas, but I'm not sold on it. But without a doubt, he either knowingly for views or unknowingly because who knows, likes to platform them. And the data proves, there's been studies on this, that he is the gateway drug to far-right personalities and YouTube channels and, you know, ideology based on the people he has on the show. So there's a lot to unpack there. You know, Bernie Sanders went on Joe Rogan's show. The episode has millions of views. Joe Rogan said after talking to Bernie's the guy he could vote for. I believe him. There's this weird thing about Joe Rogan where, you know, he's not mostly a politics show. And because of his status in the MMA world and the popularity of his podcast, he's a very influential person to young men. And, you know, it's weird. It's weird. Because he shows that right-wing personalities are essentially no better than those right-wing shows themselves. But all his other shows, it's like you go off into Bizarro world again. You know, like I mentioned, it's like it's not even the same show. So I'm going to do a video on that. Hopefully, soon. If I have time. But more Patreon subscribers mean I have the time, because I'll be able to cut time out and do that stuff. All right, back to the comments here. Sarah, why do we think that Portland, Oregon is such a hotbed for these fights? Is it because it's such a liberal city? Because the population is usually racist? Sarah, that's what you missed. It was the opening, actually, to the show. I spoke with Alex specifically, because she's a Portland reporter, to find out what brings these guys to Portland. Go back and listen. There you go. Grim says, Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer have been documented stating that they want to waste Portland resources and make Mayor Wheeler... All right, I mentioned that earlier. Pinfold says, ever notice it's always places where black and brown people are the most scarce, that skinheads and neo-Nazis are more prominent? Yeah. They did go up, though, to the upper, I think it was like Harlem area, though, to drop a flag in a park in New York City. So, your point, it's a good point. Sarah says it's true, the whole Northwest has a lot of white supremacists. Yes, Grim, it does seem like a targeted strategy to pick Portland. Grim says, not it seems, we have chat logs verifying it, right? Bullup says the Proud Boys event was not permitted. They planned a rally without the permit. To own the lib, says Grim. Pinfold says, where were all the black and Latino and Asian Proud Boys? They did a whole piece on Vice. Well, there's so few. King Ross, the comedian, says, can you see my comment? If that's your first comment, I can see it. If you commented previously, it did not show up in my feed. Luke on Facebook to the Matt Binder on Facebook. Did you only find this because you were searching your own name? Probably, actually, Luke. That's probably how Bizarro Matt Binder discovered this. Lily on Periscope says, if Alex is talking about Haley, who is running for mayor, she's behind the Proud Boys. I am not familiar. If that's true, I will look into that and possibly cover it on the show. I'm going to do an episode, thinking about it. I should do an episode about all these far-right, or at least sympathizers, running for office in 2020. Sarah Rambo. Oh, sorry. Sarah, I could use your full name on YouTube, so I could use it too. The cops in the past at these events tend to spend more time arresting the protesters than the fascists. And Sarah continues, wasn't the first gun restriction law in America passed in California in response to the Black Panthers owning guns? Could very well be the case, right? I'm not sure where it's right. But yes. Without a doubt, that's why gun regulation laws were first started being rolled out in this country. I'm not sure if California was the first place, but you're absolutely right. And to bring back your other point about how the police treat protesters, when Alex mentioned how they helped them cross the bridge, immediately in the back of my mind, I didn't bring it up on the show because, it's not a direct, comparison, but we could, when we're shooting the shit on the second half, I could bring it up. I automatically thought about Occupy in 2011, Occupy Wall Street. And something like 600 protesters crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. And police told them they could do that. And then when they all got to the middle, when there was no turning back, the police surrounded them and arrested all 600 protesters on the Brooklyn Bridge. It was national news. Just a stunning, comparison to, and I'm sure this bridge in Portland wasn't the equivalent to the Brooklyn Bridge, but so there's a stunning comparison to see how the left is treated and the right is treated. Proud Boys got Patriot Prayer got an escort across the bridge from the police. Grim says Proud Boys plan to cause mayhem and violence. Pinfold says the left is anti-prison industrial complex, so the cops are not allies, right? Lily says Gina Nelms Kuhn, or Kun? What is it? What's her last name? Whose husband is Jesse Kun from the Proud Boys. We're bragging about. I saw that video, but I'm not sure. I didn't hear their names. Right. If that's the same video you're talking about, the one where they're on the trampoline lying down. Sarah says local journalism is the backbone of the institution. Really, I mean, where does the AP get their stories if not from the local sources around the U.S.? Right. Banjo says left is best, y'all. And I'm going to read these because I'm sure my dad would like to hear them. I'm at the point where people gave the best to my dad, my pops, who's probably listening to the show. Lily says, oh no, sending prayers. Grim gives the prayer emoji. Barry says, aw. Banjo with a thanks, Matt, for the show. Sarah, oh my gosh, your poor dad. I hope he feels better. Get well soon, Mr. Binder, says Banjo. Mr. Binder could be me now, though. Bullup says, I want to wish your dad a speedy recovery. The Binder Bundle, a new name for the show. I actually went online for a while in the early days as Binder Gang, actually. Sarah says about the Bizarro Matt. It's like the opposite Matt spouting conservative talking points in Bizarro World. The right wing's been regurgitating the same talking points since, like, the Spanish Inquisition. I mean, talk about old. Lord Erinian says, I think the only black people in Oregon now play for the Trailblazers. Blah, 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 blah says, well, to be fair, the snap happened in the second movie, but yeah, it was also resolved in the last movie. And Winora goes doomed! Blah, 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 blah says, AOC next video is one of her in Greenland petting a polar bear. Blah, 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 blah says, the N-word for Italians is pastafarian. Chucky says that Fredo thing was weird. They were being dicks, but Cuomo certainly escalated a little. Yeah, I mean, you gotta ignore it to a point. Like, come on, he should know better, especially if he's been covering these things. Come on, man. I mean, not the best place to point this out, I guess, because you guys are already patrons. But the next Patreon subscriber is subscriber 69. So, nice. Nice. Just notice that. Just notice that. Grim says, I disagree, Matt. Rogan is a white nationalist. You want to say enabler? I'll agree with you. Let me go into my... I'll do the video before... It's too much to get into now. But yeah. Brian says Joe Rogan is a businessman. Brian says that. And then Ryan says Rogan's not a fascist. He's just a smooth-brained simpleton who's gathered this following. I will tell you, that's much closer to being accurate than him being a fascist. I mean, it's pretty close. Chucky says, I think Rogan does DMT and smokes weed. His memory isn't great, and the dude never does any research. That's also a big thing. Ryan says he's a very simplistic, surface-level thinker. Yes. Sarah, I watched Rogan interview Rogan. It was the most relevant thing he's ever done. Rogan interview Rogan. Brian says Joe Rogan experience used to be like a cum town until Rogan decided he wanted to make real money. Grim says Rogan is anti-Antifa, case closed. But Rogan is not very smart and doesn't know. So he's stupidly saying that. I mean, this is a guy who tells the left to, like, get over whining and stuff. And then called people tweeting at Dave Rubin, debate Sam Cedar, harassment. Like, he's not very smart, to be honest with you. He's just not. Listen, the guy's good at what he does. He's a good talker. But he doesn't have the ability to hold these conversations politically. I mean, he clearly could do MMA or whatever. You know, everyone's got their areas. He's a genius at MMA. When he's talking about politics and culture, the guy's just not... is out of his league. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Yet instead of doing the research or having someone on who knows, he just tries to wing it. I mean, he's still entertaining when he does it because, again, he's a good host. He's a good radio host. But, I mean, the content just isn't there when it comes to those topics. Ryan says he's just incapable of examining anything with a critical eye. Sarah says Rogan literally just believes everything the person in front of him says. I mean, these are all exactly hitting the point, right? I mean, that's the difference, Grim. I mean, he's not out there advocating for this stuff. He literally is that out of his element. He does not know what he's talking about. Ryan says, Portland is not as liberal as people want you to believe, and white supremacy is deeply rooted in Oregon, as was literally enshrined in the state constitution when it was formed. Right. Right. Hold on. I want to do this. I'm going to tweet now because I think people on Twitter will enjoy this. I'm going to tweet, just want to point out that the next Patreon subscriber is that my next Patreon subscriber is patron number 69. Nice. I'll put who wants to be nice. Getting my marketing on there, right? Little call to action. Let's tweet that out now. Boom. It'd be fun to have that patron subscriber by the end of this, but I'm about to close up shop for the Labor Day weekend, everyone. Hope if you're working, I hope you are still taking care of yourself, and and if you have some time off, spend it with the fam, play some video games, enjoy. Chucky says, my grandfather was a Latino white supremacist. He moved to Oregon to be with a white supremacist biker gang, so it's rural out there. That was the 60s. Right, we'll do an episode on the history of Oregon. It clearly is in line with this show. Chucky also has, gotta go. Take care, people. Started playing WoW after 11 years off. It's so addictive. Are you playing a WoW Classic, World of Warcraft Classic, now that they rolled that back out? Lord Arion, you were on the Brooklyn Bridge when Occupy crossed? You know, me and Sam Cedar, when I was on the Majority Report, we were covering Occupy on the ground. We were just not at that event. That was one of the ones we were not at. We certainly covered it in the days after. You were arrested. Grimm says, I knew friends who were arrested on the Brooklyn Bridge, but Lord says that he was arrested. Yeah, Lord says, being on the Brooklyn Bridge during Occupy Wall Street, got arrested. We should do an Occupy episode. We did plenty of them in the Majority Report when it was happening, but we should do an episode on Occupy. For sure. My dad says, thanks for the well wishes, Doomers. Renee says, get better, Papa Binder. Renee says, racist Rogan is fast just on the DL. Grim says, last time I watched Rogan was 2 years ago with Abby Martin, and he shot all over Antifa. Yeah, and I mean, Abby Martin, I was looking through his guest list, excuse me. Abby Martin is literally probably the only leftist he's had on that covers this stuff, who isn't like a major sort of presidential figure like Tulsi or Andrew Yang or Bernie. You know, he's really bad when it comes to having leftists on the show, and it shows. Whereas, then I'm going to talk about this in that video. I don't want to get too into it now. Lord says Rogan is just Dave Rubin with talent. Gerard says true. Bullwhip says, I think we see where Rogan stands when you see his video with Tim Pool versus Twitter. Oh, I did a whole episode, just me, covering that video. Please go back in the archives and look that video up. I broke that video down for I think it was close to 2 hours. We did a really long show that episode. Look on YouTube. A lot of people actually found this show because of that episode. I gotta do more like that. It was just me and the Rogan Tim Pool Twitter episode. And I played it on the show, pausing it, breaking it down. I think I'm proud of it. So go back and watch it or listen to it on the podcast. Ryan says, if you're working, make sure you actively commit time theft, preferably by listening to Doomed or other leftist best podcasts. Renee says, orc solidarity to the World of Warcraft players. Renee also says, I want a Kung Fu Rogan. And Pernicion says, I would pay to watch some Kung Fu. Grim with the black flag, heart red flag for the Antifa little flag via emojis as best as Grim can do. Folks, see you all next time. We actually have a really good show coming up next week. I'll let you guys know it. Usually I don't have them so far booked in advance because I like to be as relevant as possible. But I was talking with him to have him on this week, but to have him on next week because I had Alex on this week, and I really wanted to talk about her breaking Patriot Prayer spy story that came out just earlier this week. But next week I will have on the professor who called Bret Stephens of the New York Times a bedbug, which set off Bret Stephens of the New York Times having a complete meltdown and emailing him, the professor, and his bosses. Gotta watch out for those free speech on campus guys, right? I mean, it's going to be a good episode. I'm excited. Renee says, you got to get in touch with some Brits. It's hard to because I do this show at 9 p.m., 9:30 p.m., 10 sometimes. 9:30 is the usual time, but still, they're 6 hours ahead. It's like they gotta stay up 3, 4 o'clock and do this show. It's hard. But I will try. I will try. Pernicion says, left is love, left is best. Renee says about England, stuff's going down there. Yeah, I will figure out how to do it. Maybe someone over there will stay up late, real late, to talk with me. Or maybe we will do a real late show, like a midnight show here. And, 6 a.m. is not that early to wake up, I guess, if you're over there. Maybe we'll do an episode like that if I have to. Renee says, yeah, Alex was great. Misha would have enjoyed her. Alex was fantastic. Really enjoyed Alex. Politics Under Standard to my guest next week says, LMAO, yes. Grim says, Binder get. Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'll let you guys know the date. We were still working out the exact date, but he's down for next week, he said. Bullwhip says, thanks, Matt. You're the best of the left. Thank you. All right, guys. See you all next time. Have a great Labor Day weekend. See you guys all next week on Doom.